Good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Toby Usnik and welcoming you back to The Caring Economy. I'm honored to have as a guest today none other than Ronna Chao, who is both the chairperson of Novetex Textiles out of Hong Kong, although a global business, as well as CEO of Bai Xian Institute, which is a not-for-profit founded by her father, and we'll talk about both of these exciting organizations today. Ronna, welcome.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
I'm so grateful to have you here. We met several years ago through Sue and David Rockefeller at your dad's house, I think, for dinner. And then, of course, the relationship grew further with our mutual friend, Jean Sung, who I want to talk a little bit later about relationships, networks, and how you draw strength and contribute to those networks. But for openers, why don't you tell our audience, particularly those who might not be familiar with either the textile industry or with Asian markets, even though you're global, tell us a little bit about Novetex Textiles, and then we'll come back to you and your personal story.
Okay. Novetex Textiles Limited is a yarn spinning business that was founded by my grandfather probably close to 50 years ago. I'm third generation family member who's now running it. We call ourselves your complete yarn resource. We are a supplier for businesses, fashion houses, brands large and small all over the world. As you can imagine, the textile business has grown. There were periods of immense growth, and then it's kind of plateaued, and there are new technologies and conventional ways that are kind of not pushed out, but becoming a little bit old-fashioned. Mm-hmm. So it's not been an easy path to continue to run it. Mm-hmm. And we've been putting in new philosophies, new ideas, and then looking at new branches of business to grow out of our traditional conventional yarn spinning business.
Mm-hmm. So for example, I know from your website and our discussions, you have not just fashion, carpets and textiles appear in many different ways. Are there either some brand name products we would know or some items that we would know in our daily routines that have been touched by you all or created by you all?
Okay. In the conventional yarn spinning business side, on that side, I would imagine a large percentage of the knitwear or sweaters that are on the markets now may very likely involve some of our products, some of our yarns. So we produce anything from high-end alpaca, cashmere, to blended yarns, cotton polyester, wool acrylic, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing. When I spoke about new businesses that branch out from our conventional business earlier, I want to tell you and tell everybody about the Billy system, yes, which is the latest thing in our yarn spinning business. The Billy system is a textile upcycling system that we developed together with Hong Kong RITA, Hong Kong Research Institute of Textile and Apparel. And basically, it's not new invention per se, but it's a combination of innovative parts and traditional methods for upcycling textile waste. And originally, it's something that we developed from an inward-looking solution-finding perspective, because as you can imagine, in our yarn spinning business, and for many, many years, we were also one of the largest sweater manufacturing companies in the world. We have a lot of textile waste, or we have a lot of excess inventory or excess raw materials that we accumulate. And we were looking at our own internally generated waste, mm-hmm, and thinking, this stuff has value. If it's cashmere waste, what we call waste, it's still cashmere. If it's lamb's wool, it's still lamb's wool. So we were looking at for a solution to recapture the value of our own textile waste. And in the process of developing the Billy system, And now that it is developed, we have a factory actually with 3 lines in Taipo here in Hong Kong. And in appealing or approaching our traditional customers, we have expanded our reach to, like you mentioned, hospitality groups, F&B groups, companies with a lot of uniforms, furniture, furniture makers, carpet makers. So my hope and my goal is that products from the Billy will be much more, will be reaching a lot more people, you know, at a different level, in a different way, in addition to what we usually produce at Novetex.
Yes, I saw, ladies and gentlemen, again, we're with Ronna Chao, who's chairperson for Novetex Textiles out of Hong Kong. Ronna, I saw congratulations on your latest recognition this week from Business Insider for the Billy system. Huge kudos. You're one of, I think, 100 people really transforming business, and you and your colleagues were recognized for that. So huge kudos to you. You also, in speaking of the Billy system, it's my understanding that it's water friendly in the sense that it's minimal water usage to do all
No
that,
water.
which
Zero
is
water. Yes.
And
so,
you can, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. That is one of the big pluses of the Billy system. We, you know, the original thesis behind the Billy system is obviously to be sustainable, to be eco-friendly, to reuse what we would normally dispose of. And in that whole formula, in that whole thinking, we're also considering, okay, we recapture the value, we don't create additional waste, but we also don't want to create waste or hazardous materials during the process, right? So in the conventional way, in the conventional yarn spinning and sweater making businesses, a lot of water has to be used to wash the raw materials, to wash the finished goods, and, you know, and dyeing and all of that. So the Billy doesn't use any water in the cleaning and the sanitization processes, or in washing the materials. We use, we have 3 sanitization steps. Initially, the first step is ozone sanitization. So we use ozone tanks. We make our own ozone using the air surrounding air. And then when the sanitization process is done, it is released. The ozone is released, not ozone is released. The ozone is then converted back and then released into the air as a harmless gas. And then later on in the Billy process, we also sanitize again twice using UV. So the whole process from cleaning the textile waste or clothes or excess materials to the production of what we call slivers, fiber strips at the end of the Billy, does not, that whole process does not involve any water, and there's no emission of hazardous, harmful chemicals.
Yes, and then the salvaged material or the upcycled material, then you ship off to your factory in mainland China for spinning in all kinds of new, wonderful ways. So you're really becoming part of that sort of full circular economy that we hope for, right? That we work toward.
Trying to be. We are really trying to do that. And then, you know, we are just one factory. We're just one manufacturer. The 3 lines that we have in our Taipo factory at full capacity can process, each line can process up to 1 ton of textile waste per day. Now that depends on what is input and, you know, how much time is spent on sorting and all that. But if you think about it, 3 tons maximum per day at my factory is not even 1% of the textile waste that gets sent to landfills in Hong Kong alone on a daily basis.
Can you ballpark for our audience on the caring economy what the global figure would be like for waste, textile waste?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but again, using the Hong Kong number, okay? In Hong Kong alone, it's probably close to 400 tons a day.
Unbelievable.
just to landfills, right? So imagine the materials or the items that are not being disposed of, that's not being used, not sold, but maybe kept at a warehouse somewhere. And we all know that that is happening.
Yes.
So if you can just imagine, that's a statistical figure in Hong Kong. Our Environmental Protection Department actually publishes that figure. Just imagine all the rest of the stuff that isn't counted, or that's just being accumulated and pushed aside somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So I write in the Caring Economy about scale, right? So the Billy Project, how does it scale? Are you sort of willing to share, in a sense, your technology, or invite others to come in and have a look? Because it sounds really quite revolutionary, even though you're being quite modest, I think, in saying it's not really new. It's still very impressive, and it's moving it's moving us forward, not backwards. So how do you get scale with it?
Thank you, Toby. We are very happy to share, and in fact, quite a number of different parties have reached out to us interested in licensing the technology, or asking us if we would set up elsewhere. The thing about the Billy system, textile waste is a first world problem.
Yes.
Textile manufacturing, as we all know, is happening not in these first world cities because of cost, because of labor, access and all of that. So I think we need to get our heads around the idea that the Billy system needs to be located in cities. But the other thing that we need to think about is the Billy only produces fiber slivers. It doesn't actually spin the fiber into yarn. So the proximity to a yarn spinning facility also is also a critical factor. So for us, it makes perfect sense because our yarn spinning factory, Novetex, is just across the border in Zhuhai, China. So we're not, when we do ship our slivers to Zhuhai, we're not creating an enormous carbon footprint. But if you imagine the Billy system for instance, in New York, and I have to ship all of that stuff back to Asia, that kind of defeats the purpose. So this is something that I think the scalability is there, definitely, but we need to identify the proper partners, considering location and all of that, when we do go to the next step of expansion.
Yes, and with the consideration of the full life cycle of the materials, right? So it's a virtuous circle.
That's right.
I'm going to jump ahead here because you and I have had some exchanges in the past, online in particular, around consumption. And what I write about I wrote in Women's Wear Daily last year about unbridled consumption, in my view, being the biggest elephant in the living room, that a lot of the fashion industry in particular don't want to go there or talk about it. They'll find ways to green their supply chains and to be responsible-ish. But what they're not saying is, oh, don't buy so much or have less. Right? And I think that it's imperative that we start to have those conversations with young people and with our colleagues to say, and I used to say this at Christie's, where I ran communications for almost a decade, is buy quality, cherish it, and then steward it on to the next generation. So I don't want to lead the witness here, but Ronna, again, we're with Ronna Chao, who's the chairperson of Novetex Textiles out of Hong Kong. Can you tell us a little bit about that concept of consumption and where are you on it and where do we go from here?
Okay. I'll tell a couple of stories. So I think, number one, consumption has become almost like therapy for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, retail therapy.
It's something that you do to make yourself feel better, feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. That concept in itself, I don't think there's anything wrong. I remember having this conversation with my sister-in-law many, many years ago when we were saying, oh, you know, I'm feeling kind of bummed today. And then Maria told me, Ronna, go out and buy a new lipstick. That'll make you feel better. And I mean, a lipstick is very small and you're not spending a lot of money. But if I think most women, if you look at your makeup cabinet, it's not even a drawer anymore. There's, you know, do I really need 20 lipsticks? They're almost all the same color. So that's one story. But it does, I think there's a lot of connection between, you know, I have the ability to spend, or I have the ability to buy something. And that has been exacerbated by, you know, fast fashion, for instance. Things are much cheaper, or drugstore brands, things are cheaper. So consumption has become more accessible to more people.
Yes, and sorry to interrupt, but to stick with your lipstick metaphor of sort of covering up, the retail therapy kind of masks the actual issue that's keeping that
exactly.
Person. So we're not really dealing with the root causes of what's making us unhappy. We're just covering it up. So. Right.
So that's the first story. Second story is I want to tell a story about my late great uncle. He passed away when he was in his 90s, really healthy and all that. And I remember at one of the dinners we had with him, he was wearing this really nice sweater, and he was telling us about, you know, how long he had had it. And I said, hey, you know, Uncle, why don't I give you, you know, we make sweaters. Why don't I give you a new one? And his response was, no need. I've had this for 50 years.
Yeah.
It's in great shape. Every winter, I take it out of the chest, my chest of drawers. I unwrap it. I wear it for the season, and then I put it in the sun. I clean it, and then I wrap it back up and I put it away. And that conversation really struck me, because I thought, okay, maybe it's different because he's not a clothes horse. He's not a fashion icon type of person, but it speaks volumes about about valuing something, right? And he said, it is perfectly good quality. It is functional. I don't, you know, if there's a moth hole in it, I will mend it. And I think a lot of it has to do also with, you know, his having grown up during times where he had to be really frugal, right? So that's another story, but it really resonated and really struck me. And that translated into a conversation I had with my middle daughter. You know, we were in London, I think it was a couple years ago, and we were looking at things and we were shopping, and I said to her, Ariana, don't buy another cheap coat.
Right.
Let's invest in a good one, good quality, classic style, that you can keep and wear for the next 20 years or beyond. And I remembered a coat that my mother gave me when I was little that she had worn as a child. And then I also still have sweaters hand knit by my own grandmother that I wore, that my kids wore, and now they're preserved. And I tell them, you know, these are pieces that your children can wear. So I think we need to have more stories like that. We need to tell people the history of clothes, you know, the value of things.
Yes. Yeah. Not in hand-me-downs, but more like aspirational. Like, of course you'd want something that was your grandfather's sweater or trench coat or a quality suit or tie. It has what we would call it, Christie's back in the day, provenance, right? Like there's a story that goes with it. Interestingly, I used to joke with folks that at 250 years of age, Christie's was the original recycler.
That's right.
Because you buy quality and you pass it along. It holds its value, more or less. And there's a story that goes with that provenance idea. I know you probably actually know Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia. I've never met the man, but I've always been inspired by him. And he talks about this very topic. You know, he'll say, don't buy this coat. Use what you have, repair it. They have one of the biggest repair services in the country. They encourage people to, you know, get a puffy coat, put duct tape on it. It's like a badge of honor. It shows a life well lived. So it's very much that storytelling you're talking about, I think. So let me take it from your family out to your employees and to your larger stakeholders. How do you, Ronna Chao, again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ronna Chao, who's chairperson of Novetex Textiles, one of the world's leading, largest single-site spinners. So how do you get your employees and your partners on board with this effort around the Billy system, sustainability, more informed consumption, and so forth?
I think, initially, we always look at the business part of, every initiative that we start, because it is a business. I always tell people the Billy is a business, and I do have to look at P&L. I do have to consider, how to keep it going and how to bring business in. It's not a charity. It's not a PR effort. And so we do have to look at that. And I get my teams, they are very passionate about it. And, anything new is always very appealing to people, especially in this case, something very new coming from a 50-year-old, very traditional business. So there's legacy, and then we're talking about building new stories on that platform of legacy. So that's one thing. But I think in general, people are much more aware and conscious of what we're doing now will have an effect tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. They may not have a solution for that particular problem, but they definitely don't want to contribute further to it. So I think that's one of the things that we don't even need to discuss it explicitly, but it's kind of in people's minds. Yes. And whatever's in your mind will affect your behavior and your actions, right? So I think that's another thing. And of course, when we are encouraged and inspired by a lot of other players in this space, we are very we keep abreast of what's going on within our industry, new things that are happening, and then beyond. So for instance, we never thought about going to carpet makers, big carpet makers, because it's very normal to think, okay, can we do this? And the very first thing we thought about was we cannot upcycle carpeting because of the rubber backing. And so it kind of just stopped there. And then we went on to other leads, right? But then I said to my team, we can't upcycle their product, but we can try to collaborate with them to make an upcycled collection.
Wow.
So we did do that. We used our upcycled yarns. We introduced our upcycled yarns to a very large carpet manufacturing company based here as well. And they are now trialing, because it's, you don't want to just say, okay, well, because I can't upcycle this, therefore I don't get involved in the whole process of being conscious and eco-friendly. So those are some of the ways that we get our partners and our employees on board.
That's great. One of the reasons I also like that story, Ronna, is that I'm a big believer in piloting things and trying things out, and not necessarily beating one's chest, but going quietly, stealthily, and often going to your most junior or inexperienced people to ask them what they think, what they react to, because nobody's cornered the market on good ideas, right? And so your employees are also your customers, and
that's right.
Have insight, and it's quite flattering, I think, to be asked by a superior who manages you what you think. And then conversely, those of us who manage people also learn from those relationships, which I'm mindful of the time. So Ron, I'm going to use that as a segue into a little bit of a discussion about Bai Xian Institute. Again, ladies and gentlemen, not only is Ronna Chao with us today as chairperson of Novetex Textiles, but she's also the CEO of a family-founded institute called the Bai Xian Institute, which is an academic exchange organization in Asia. Let Ronna tell us about it in her own words.
Okay. Bai Xian Asia Institute is a nonprofit organization that's established on the premise of, we want to foster exchange and understanding and friendship building, especially among the youth of Northeast Asia. And the reason behind that is my father, in his youth, was a student at the University of Tokyo. This was in the late 80s through the early 60s, late 50s through the early 60s, sorry. And, he lived and learned among Japanese students and other Asian students at the time. They traveled, they did sports, they bickered, all sorts of things. And when he turned 70, which was about 10 years ago, and he was, he says he became semi-retired, but my father never retires, has never retired. He's still working. Anyway, he said, okay, it's probably time for me to give back to society, but I don't want to just give money and not know where it's gone. And that was also about the time when tensions were arising in this region between Japan and its neighbors, Japan, China, Japan, Korea, Japan, Philippines, and Vietnam. Politics, that's all politics. Among the people of these countries and the academic institutions and businesses, everything was pretty much going well. So my father's vision at the time was to set up a scholarship program where Asian students would be supported to study abroad within Asia. So we funded this scholarship program, and it's called Bai Xian because in Chinese it sounds like it has the same pronunciation as 100 virtuous learned people, 100 scholars. So we started with a program that would support 100 students every year, pursuing their undergrad or master's or beyond degrees. Mm-hmm. at top institutions, top universities in Northeast Asia, mainly in China, Japan, Hong Kong, Korea. Mm-hmm. So we are already in our 7th year.
Congratulations. And is it still approximately 100 scholars, or how many?
We have, since last year, we have restructured the program a little bit because initially we had 16 partner universities. Mm-hmm. And after running the program for 5 to 6 years, we realized it was necessary. There were a lot of achievements that were made through the program with 16 partner universities, but with limited resources, we really wanted to focus the resources to get focused impact and results. Mm-hmm. So as of this year, now we're down to 6 partner universities with concentrated efforts. Mm-hmm. And this year, unfortunately, with COVID, yeah. our grants are down to maybe about 60, 70, but mm-hmm. our goal is still to have 100 students in mm-hmm. the pool every year.
Well, I wanted to ask you about COVID, and what I'm thinking more and more is the great pivot of this year. Let's start with the Institute first, but also with your business. How did you pivot? Like, what is Bai Xian Institute doing now? Everything is online, or it's deferred a year, or how's it roll out now?
I'll give you an example of what we did at Bai Xian. So one of the key features of the Asian Future Leaders Scholarship Program under Bai Xian Asia Institute is that we have a summer program every year where we bring all of our scholars together onto one campus. And we've been doing that every year since the beginning. So obviously with COVID, mm-hmm. That was not, we couldn't do that this year, bring everybody together. So do we just not have a summer program? Do we just let things pass and then we focus on the following year? We decided engagement and connection between the students was something that we couldn't let go of. So, with innovations like Zoom and mm-hmm. and webinars and all of that, we then put on a whole series of virtual events. So not the same as having 120 students together in one place, but the topics were relevant and current. We promoted these events. We got interesting people to speak. There was a lot of interaction. And so, you know, we have to be adaptive and flexible, I think, in times of, not necessarily challenge, but in times when things change. We have to be fluid along with the fluidity, you know, of the times. Mm-hmm. So that's one example of how we adapted to COVID at Bai Xian. In the businesses, you know, it's 2020 is a very strange year, to say the least.
To say the
so
least.
my last trip of 2020 was during Chinese New Year holidays. My family and I, we went to Tokyo, mm-hmm. and I think it wasn't called COVID at the time, but things were already happening. So that was the last time I traveled out of Hong Kong, and now it's September already, right? So in the beginning of that period, my colleagues and I, we were all kind of fretting and anxious. What's going to happen this year? We can't go and meet our customers. We can't go and meet our fund managers. We can't go to talk to the universities. And all of my trips have been canceled, both for fun and for work, right? But again, you adapt and you have to be flexible and you have to stay positive, right? So if I can't do this, mm-hmm. Then I have to find a way to do mm-hmm. that, which is as good as possible mm-hmm. in comparison to this, given the circumstances. Yes. And I think, you know, your mentality, the way your perspective, the way you look at things really, really affect how you do things and what the outcome is. It's one way to keep looking at the negative, right? Glass half full. And another way to say, okay, if we can't do this, what else can we do?
Yes. Well, having sat at dinner at your father's house with you, I can see the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because that inspiration that led him to Tokyo and beyond, clearly you as well. I mean, I know you're a proud alumna of Brown and Stanford, so you've lived, worked, and studied abroad, Goldman Sachs and elsewhere. Like you, I was a study abroad student. I did a Fulbright in Belgium. For me, getting outside of one's own home is the best way to start to understand and empathize with the other, whatever the other yes. is. And I think in a COVID era, it's more important than ever to do that. We've got political things happening that are trying to blame each other on things. And I firmly believe, and I think you do as well, that exchange is critical to our humanity and to finding a way mm-hmm. forward. And again, since no one's cornered the market on good ideas, no nation has either. So before COVID, I was in Beijing every quarter for the past 3 years, and I'm very bullish on China in terms of creativity, their youth, and what they aspire to do and to better themselves. And I still keep very active in a COVID era through WeChat. And I mm-hmm. tell folks all the time that are interested or curious about business in China, and I'd like to know if you agree with this statement, you don't even need to get on a plane to engage with China, right? The Chinese diaspora is everywhere. And mm-hmm. you can engage, you could do a focus group here in New York, where I am, with NYU students from mainland China, if you wanted to.
That's right.
Or you could just do something on WeChat. I've coached a couple of nonprofits to do that very thing, to just create a little focus group of mainland Chinese students and ask them about your cause. Mm-hmm. One case, it's, Meatless Monday, I think, Sid and Elaine Lerner, who, their colleague David out in Hong Kong. David,
yes, David, yeah. Yes,
so
Green Monday. Yes.
I think it's a perfect example, right? A cause that's transferred across the oceans and still moves forward because of technology like WeChat.
Right.
Right. So we only have a couple minutes left. Ladies and gentlemen, we're with Ronna Chao, who's chairperson of Novetex, Textiles, and CEO of Bai Xian Institute. I want to come back to where we began, please, which is Jean Sung, the lovely Jean Sung at JP Morgan Chase, who runs the philanthropy center there, who I've collaborated with on many occasions. You have a sort of, I won't call it a secret society, but you have a circle of friends that are
yes.
there for each other, for fun and for business. So can you talk a little bit about friendship and about how you support each other?
Okay, I think in our age, in my age now, and this is also in line with what we're talking about, in the fashion industry and consumerism. we don't need a lot of friends, but we need a small circle of very good friends. Almost, I can definitely compare my circle of tight friends to family. And maybe arguably some of them may be closer to me than some of my more distant family members. We don't need a lot, but we need quality. It's just like when we're talking about clothing, right?
Yep.
I need one very good winter coat and one very good, really warm sweater or something like that. So friendship is like that. And I think we look at the value of what we bring to the table for each other, and we cherish that. That is very important, and we support each other. We don't judge. We are open and honest. This is exactly the same philosophy and value that we're trying to instill in our scholars in the Bai Xian Asia Institute. It's very easy for us to point out differences or to look at the negative side of everything. I think that's very easy. And I'm not saying to not look at the differences, but look at the differences, celebrate them, and appreciate. That's what makes us interesting. That's what makes us complementary.
Yes.
So that's how I look at friendship and our networks of people and relationships.
Yes. And also I think in business, it's the same thing. What are your intentions as a business person? Are they purely to make money, or are they also to both make money and perhaps enhance the human condition or the planetary legacy that's going to be left? So I like to go back to this idea of intentionality, because as with your friends, of course you challenge them, but not for the sake of challenging them, because you want to better the relationship, and you want to, I like to think of it as advancing the narrative. We can all go backwards and have the same old conversations, but how sustainable is that really? You want to move forward across time with your pals, with your colleagues, and know that you're at least doing your darndest to make a difference. So
that's right.
So I want to thank, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ronna Chao, from our chairperson from Novetex Textiles and CEO of Bai Xian Institute. Anyone who's in Asia, who's thinking about studying there, or has family members they want to get involved, check out their site. And thank you for joining me here on the Caring Economy, Ronna. And please come back. I want to hear how things continue to advance for you.
Thank you so much, Toby, for having me. It's wonderful always to talk to you.